I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. So, what are we talking about today? Well, here's what I want you to understand. And I'm sure many of you have maybe reached out to an investment company or wanted to figure out how do you get help about investing. And here's the truth. The truth is that every day, a woman, a person of color, reaches out to a financial services institution. And because they don't have enough investable assets, they really don't get access to private client kinds of resources. And so as a result of that, many are put into kind of cookie cutter funds that actually don't rise in value or increase in value to the degree that they could. Because here's what I want you to know. Learning about the financial markets and investing, typically that is inherited. I mean, literally, if you didn't have someone in your family who knew how to invest, or your family didn't have a trusted financial advisor, you probably didn't learn either. And the reason why this is important, because the truth is that anyone can learn how to invest if given access to the right tools and resources. And that's exactly the conversation that we're going to have today. How one woman was able to really get access to the tools and resources and then apply that knowledge and now pay that knowledge to her family, because now they too will have that inheritance of knowledge. So get ready to get wealthy. It's time to get wealthy. Now I want to talk about the 3 things they really don't want you to know. And here they are. The first is that investing in the stock market is high risk. Well, the truth about investing is that investing in stocks have outperformed any other kind of investment, whether it's investing through bonds or investing through a savings account. The one thing you have to get comfortable with, though, is knowing that your money's going to go up and down. That's what wealthy people know that most people don't. Number 2, it's just way too complicated. Well, you want to know the truth is that if you actually learn about the financial markets and how they work, it's really not as complicated as you think. And then lastly, that you need a lot of money to invest. Well, it is true that if you go to an institution, sometimes they'll make you think that you need a lot of money. But what you're going to learn on Get Wealthy is that you can begin to invest with dollars and cents. You used to have thousands of dollars, but now you can invest through financial apps on the internet, and just know this, that anyone can get wealthy. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I'm so excited about this next guest because she is like so many people, first generation investors. She's a technology professional. She's had immense career and educational success. And yet, like so many people, she felt like she needed to give her assets to a financial advisor. And yet, once she really gained the knowledge that she needed, she was able to increase the returns on her investments from 5% to 84% in just 1 year. So how did she accomplish that? Well, for so many people, what I want you to understand is that it really begins with these 3 things: mindset, strategy, and execution. And for Diya, who you'll meet in just a moment, her mindset, she needed to make the shift to a wealth mindset. And that really meant understanding that she could invest her own assets. She just needed to learn how. And what I know as someone who has been coaching people for years is that for most of us, learning about or the knowledge of how to build wealth really is inherited. So if you didn't have anyone in your family to show you the tools and the resources that you needed to invest with confidence, you probably never learned about the financial markets. If you didn't know how to really what strategy that you needed to employ in order to make your money grow, you probably are like so many people, and like Diya, who had a 401k and savings, but never really felt like she knew or had the confidence to learn how to actually invest in the stock market. And then finally, you have to know how to execute. And that means it's not enough to learn all of the things about the financial markets. You have to actually apply what you learned. And that's exactly what Diya did. And so I'm excited to welcome her into our Get Wealthy conversation today. Well, welcome to the program. Welcome to Get Wealthy, Diya.
Thank you for having me, Deborah.
Well, I want to begin by you just kind of sharing a little bit about your financial, story. Like, how did you ever learn how to invest? Did anyone teach you as you were going through your kind of educational career?
No, actually, I think that was one of the probably most frustrating things as I got older was to realize that I really didn't have that education. I mean, I went to college and had participated in a number of certification programs and continued to further in my education, but financial literacy really wasn't a mainstay. And so I didn't have the background, the financial wherewithal, and certainly not in investing. And even as I started to move into work environments, that financial education was limited to what we would find out as you started to invest in your 401k. And that was primarily to actually have you invest in their products. So I didn't have a broad financial understanding, but certainly as I went into the workforce, I knew enough to know that I should have a retirement fund, right? And that was pretty much the basics. One of the things that, Deborah, we've talked about, I come from meager beginnings. So my family didn't talk about money because we didn't have it. And my mother used to say that often. We didn't talk about money because we didn't have money. So there was no conversation to be had. So when you talk about that sort of legacy or that happening as part of your family or generations, we didn't have that experience. And so I really felt like I was at a disadvantage. I was really starting, miles behind some others.
Well, the other question that I have for you, because I think it's so relevant to just our audience and just average folk, and that is, once you knew that like the whole investing world existed, I mean, how did you feel about actually making the choices in the things that were available to you, like your 401k or that sort of investment that is common for most people?
So I would say that, again, my financial education came from came from doing and listening to whatever financial institution that was providing us our retirement plans. And initially, and I know I've seen things make some dramatic shifts, but initially that was somewhat limited to driving you into specific programs. Now they have portals with lots of, sort of educational tools that you could leverage in other programs. But initially it was really, how do you get into the target fund? That was the one that I had that we changed. And so my viewpoint and my perspective was limited. And then as I started to invest, it was really just around the 401k. I thought that if I got enough money to really look at investment more, I would hire someone that would really help me in understanding or maneuvering, because we have skilled individuals in those areas for a reason. And I didn't, even though I know that I'm intelligent, I felt like that was an area that was for someone else to really help inform me, but not something that I would take on and learn myself and manage myself. So if I got enough money, I would bring someone in and they would pretty much tell me how to do, what to move, where to put things, and that was sufficient. And I think that that was very similar to what the 401k and those target funds were, right? That it kind of directed you in a path, but with limited scope, limited knowledge or information. And I missed opportunities to really maximize my investments and make more.
And I think that's really the key point, just in terms of you not having any exposure and then feeling like somebody else has specifically had this knowledge and that you needed to rely on them. Now, since you gaining the knowledge that you needed, what are your thoughts now? Like you've, as I said earlier, increased your returns from 5 to 84% in 1 year. What would you tell our audience about how, that journey and how you feel now that you have accomplished this goal?
Right. Can I say don't use target funds? No. That's probably not true. I think that's a good starting point for folks. Certainly it was for me, so that I made sure I was investing. But I think that it's doable. And that's probably one of the things that I didn't recognize, that you and Wealthy You really helped me to understand that this was something that I could learn and I could manage. And, I was also concerned about the time that would require. But I realize now that the time is time well spent, right? Especially when you start to see the returns. And so the biggest thing was, one of the biggest shifts for me was that I was capable of learning and understanding everything that I needed to know in order to be a smart investor, in order to make better decisions that actually allowed me to see benefit. And in that first year, I had the privilege of actually doing, one-on-one coaching with you. And I think it was in our first 2 sessions where you showed me how to evaluate my funds and really look at the target fund that I was investing my money in and was getting limited return. And I know that's also a function of the market, but there was more, and there were other other funds that I could look at and consider, and diversifying in a way so that I could actually see more in terms of my investment. And that was something we did in a couple of 45-hour long sessions. It wasn't long before I had the tools to be able to start to understand and look at these things a lot more objectively and make better decisions that I owned, right? And I think that that was part of it as well. Not that I just relied on someone else, but that these were decisions that I was making for my financial wellness, my financial well-being, my financial future, and that of my future generations as far as my family is concerned. And that was huge. That was huge, and it made a difference. And then we went from just looking at the retirement funds, because that's where all my money was at the time, to then having conversations about stock. And there's a little hesitance, I think, because what you don't know, you tend to fear or reject. And you made that understanding simple, right? And I think that was huge in terms of making the mindset shift that I needed. There's something that you say often, and that's you can't save your way to wealth. And my grandmother was one who saved money under her mattress or in the closet in a little box, and that was the extent. We knew that there was some value or need to save a little bit, but that didn't do it. That didn't get my grandmother out of the projects, right? Just saving a little bit of money. And not saying that savings is not good, but that alone wasn't enough to see the kind of changes that I wanted for myself and for my family.
Oh, that's, it's a great, and that's what I want our audience to understand. It's a great segue into our next conversation with Diya. And it really is about exactly what you said. You can't save your way to wealth. You must invest. And that's making that shift to a wealth mindset. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the mindset shifts that Diya had to make in order to achieve, to go from 5% to 84% return. So when we come back, you're going to learn a little bit more about mindset, strategy, and execution.
Let's be honest, as successful women, we're crushing it. Maxed out 401k and Roth IRA? Check. Aggressive savings and investments? Check. Yet, the freedom our success was supposed to buy can leave us stuck on the six-figure hamster wheel, watching retirement slip further down the road. There's another way. Get coaching courses and community at wealthyu.com.
So welcome back to Get Wealthy. I'm really excited about this conversation, and I hope you are too. Diya Nguyen is just sharing with you, all of our audience, her own journey to wealth. And right now, what I want to do, Diya, is just talk about, the kind of mindset shift or beliefs that you had. And I think you referenced that by saying that you saw your grandmother saving, and now once you had your own kind of transformation, you now realize that you can't just save your way to wealth. And so to that end, like, what kind of changes in your belief system did you have to make in order to have the courage, to invest? And I think one of the points you made was that once you started investing in stock, that fear of loss. So just internally, what kind of beliefs did you have to change in order to really allow yourself to take on more risk?
I think the first was that I had the capacity to learn this and understand what was necessary. I think that was a big mindset shift, right? Because again, I mentioned that I thought others had the expertise and they could help guide, but not necessarily that was something I would do myself. And then I think the other was, willing to take the risk. I remember when we were first starting and I had selected in my target fund what was supposed to be aggressive, right? And you looked at that and you said, this isn't aggressive at all. And so the notion of taking on additional risk or being aggressive in terms of my choices and even in investing in stock was a big shift for me. And we make choices every day that are considered or could be considered risky, but was I willing to take that same kind of risk for a different financial picture than what I had? And I think that was the other big one. And now, it's not just stock. My next step was real estate. And then I'm looking at what else can we do and what other things can we move into, what other vehicles are available so that it just doesn't have to be this one thing. And again, you've often talked about diversifying. And so I'm often looking at what else can I invest in that will be ways in which we can build wealth and that I could lay the right foundation for building wealth for my children. And so the biggest thing was, again, that shift in willing to take the risk from a mindset perspective. And I think, perhaps it was, a little inner tenacity, not wanting to sort of live into the same experiences that my mother, I did, my grandmother did, and wanting something so much more.
Well, and I love how you characterize that. It's almost as if the more you did, the more confident you became, and the more curious you became over other opportunities, right? So when we come back, I want to continue this conversation with Diya around mindset, because what she just described was really making that shift to a wealth mindset. And what you need to understand about investing or taking the kind of steps that Diya has taken is that the only reason you haven't taken them yourselves typically is because this knowledge is inherited. And so when we come back, I want to delve in a little bit more into mindset and beliefs that Diya had to shift to in order to now start making the kinds of investments that she's doing outside of just her 401k.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Okay, so now, isn't this a fascinating conversation? And I hope you're really thinking about your own mindsets and perhaps some of the beliefs that you need to change if you're going to experience the kind of financial success that you desire. And so now what I want to talk with Diya a little bit about is her financial foundation, her beliefs. And I want her to think, so Diya, my question to you really is, if you were to think about your first experience with wanting to grow your money, what do you think about in your, even as you grew up, it could be as a child or even high school or college?
That's an interesting question. I almost don't remember an experience as a child that I could think of saying that I wanted to grow my money. I knew that we didn't have much, and so we wanted money, and we thought the way to do that, or the way to build that, was to go to school, get an education, and get a good job, right? And savings had to be a part of that, and you wanted to do something as far as retirement, but outside of that, grow your money, I don't know was a consideration. You worked. Right. I think that was the sort of common, or prevailing thought. You work, you get a good job, and that's how you come out of the experiences, or come out of the hood, or come out of poverty. But I think the learning that I've gotten working with you has really been pivotal, and actually me desiring to want to grow my money, not just earn, right? And that's one of the other things that you talk about, right? Making the shift from an income mindset. And so you mentioned this a moment ago. There was one thing, and I got a little bit more comfortable with investing, and then I wanted to do it more. And so I'm looking and actively seeking out ways that we actually can grow our income as a family, and the things that we can do to build that same sort of knowledge, understanding with our children. And so that has happened more latter. It wasn't early on. My early experiences wasn't about growing money at all. It's about having it, and you get it from having a job, right? You get a good career.
Oh, you know what? You so aptly described the difference from shifting from that income mindset that you described. And that's really what most of us were taught, myself included, that we would go to school, get a good job, and that financial success meant making more income it really didn't mean making your income work for you. And so when we come back, what I want to have a conversation with Diya about, now that she made her shift to that wealth mindset, what is the next thing that she had to do? What strategy did she have to figure out in order to really accelerate her financial growth? So we'll be having that conversation when we come back. So welcome back. So we've talked about mindset, and Diya's done a great job of really describing her journey, if you will, and giving you an insight to what her beliefs about money were and how she made that shift from wanting to earn an income to now finally making her money grow. And so now what I'd love to talk with you, Diya, about is strategy. Right. So one of the points that I like to make is that everybody has different opportunities in front of them, that if they were to identify, it would help them accelerate their financial growth. And certainly you going from 5% to 84% in just 1 year in terms of investing. Talk to us a little bit about, you learned the tools, you got access to the tools. What's the next thing that you did, just in terms of now what you had to think about from what your own resources were and what you could actually apply from what you were learning?
So one of the first things, and I mentioned this before, was now that I had an understanding of how to evaluate my retirement funds, the mutual funds, was to actually make some changes to the funds that I was investing in. And so one of the first ones was to move out of a target fund for my retirement, for my 401k, into a much more diversified set of funds that I invested in. So that was one of the first things. That was one of the first things. The second was then to start looking at actual stocks that we would invest in. And some of that was just looking at some of the things that I commonly use, or places that I frequent, companies that we support, to start to look at making investment there. And so that was the next step. Now, in terms of strategy, one of the other things that you helped me to do was to maximize the investments in my retirement fund. And so I put in a system so that every year I would increase the percentage that I was actually investing. So, if it was, I started off with 10%, just that's a great number to start off with. We started off with 10%, but then how do I increase every year 1.5%, 2%, to be able to increase just what I was investing in terms of retirement fund. And that became one thing. And then we moved into, how do I look at investing from some of the return in the stock into other areas of stock. And then the next thing was to begin looking at real estate, right? And understanding what could I invest in. I didn't immediately move into my own properties, but investing in some other funds that would allow me to invest in real estate that was being built, and now looking at property that could be potential for myself. But that has been a little bit of the plan and the journey there, just in terms of increasing the investment and taking the returns. Now, one thing that I didn't mention along there was for me to look at where else was I spending money, and were those lucrative places to spend money. So if there was an opportunity for me to change my insurance, for instance, insurance plans to another vendor or provider, would that give me some additional resources that I could then invest somewhere else, right? I wanted to maximize the resources that I had to be able to build, as opposed to just spending. And that was part of the work that you have us do, right? Is looking across our bills and looking at our spending habits and finding other resources. And that was one of the other things that was great about the community, because everyone's in the community sharing those sorts of things. Oh, I looked at this. Oh, I just saw a plan that would provide, a discount in this area. We were all looking at how do we move from, one insurance carrier to another, because people were finding discounts, right? And being able to lower their monthly spend. So there was actually, some money that we could use, because not everybody goes and gets a, 10%, 20% increase in terms of their income. So we had to be smart and find other ways that we could actually invest in the plans that we wanted to continue to build wealth.
Love it, love it, love it. I mean, and that's how you get wealthy, right? It's not how much money you make, it's what you do with it that counts. And you know what, Diya, you've given a lot of different strategies, and I hope our audience is taking notes about some of the things that you have done in order to not only invest and get a higher return, but also invest more. So those were some great points. So when we come back, I want to talk about, like, you're in a community, you're hearing all these strategies, you're learning how to invest, but how do you actually execute on what you're learning? So when we come back, we're going to have a conversation with Diya about how she actually executed on all of those strategies that she just described to you now. Okay, so Diya, excellent. I love how you describe making the shift from an income to a wealth mindset, specifically just around, well, I never even thought about, growing my money. I was just thinking about how to make more income. And so that's really, really important. I want our audience to understand how significant that is. But when you talk about, so we talk about mindset, you talked about strategies, different ways that you found more money, how you were actually going to increase the amount that you were investing. How did you now take in all this information and now say, okay, I'm going to execute on that? What advice would you give people about execution on the ideas that you're sharing with them today?
The biggest thing was investing the time. So I didn't pay as much attention to my 401k plan, right? You pick the target fund, you put your money in there, and you get a monthly statement perhaps, or maybe quarterly. And those were the times, because in my mind, we said the investment was long-term. So you put it in there and you try to leave it so that you're not thinking about what you lost or what you spent or the fluctuations that you might see in the market. And so the thought was, put it in there, don't really look, don't pay attention. And I didn't spend a lot of time at all looking at my resources. And so one of the biggest things in terms of execution was actually allocating time. And initially it was weekly, right? Because I was doing research and I was studying, and we had, the steps that we go through to look at mutual funds and stock. I don't spend that same kind of time now, but initially I spent and had to allocate time on my calendar once a week to actually do some work, right? To look at and research funds or research stock, look at other, opportunities for investment, see what other people were doing. We purchased a subscription to the Motley Fool and others, so that we could actually start to consume other financial investment knowledge and information. So I'm constantly feeding myself, right, around that information that was useful. So those were the two things I think in terms of execution was investing the time, and then making sure that I was consuming other information that would be useful to me. And then the last thing I would say, and it probably is first, was writing the plan, right? It was making the plan written and something that I could go back to execute. So one of the things in latter years, you had us, put together a vision board. And that vision board is a part of the plan, right? These were the things that I was thinking of, or where I want to see myself, or how we want to show up at some later point. And then it was, well, how do I get that? What things do I need to put in place? Working backwards from that picture, what are the things that I need to put in place, or what do I have to have in order to make that reasonable? And so then the time weekly and later on monthly is what I invest in being able to work that plan. So those my three. Started off a little backwards, but those are my three execution steps.
No, I love that, you are giving people like realistic examples of time, right? And because I think that so often that's an hindrance to actually executing on anything, because you think it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be too complicated. All of the things that people never really tell you, but when you actually start applying it, you experience that kind of success. And so when we come back, one of the things I want to talk with you about is from everything that you've done in this process of mindset, strategy, execution, like, what are the things that you really did that were the most impactful in helping you to have the kind of success that you're having? So when we come back, we're going to talk about how she analyzed, optimized, and maximized the kinds of process and strategies that we're talking about here on Get Wealthy. Okay, so man, we've covered a lot of different concepts with Diya, all about getting wealthy. And if you'll think about, I hope you're taking notes and you're thinking about specific strategies that she used in order to accelerate her growth. But now what I want to talk with Diya about is not only the process of the concept of mindset, strategy, and execution, but how you do things in real time. And so I want to start with what I think is the most important aspect of it all that you've talked about today. And it was, here you had access to all of these options through your employer, right? And you talked about target date funds. So I want to explain that. Just target date funds are where you pick a date that you're going to retire, and then the investment company sort of puts a group of funds together for you. Now, when we started out with you kind of looking at your returns, I mentioned it was 5% initially. Did you know that you were earning 5%? And then what did you actually do to figure out, oh, I'm not earning as much as I could?
Well, so did I know? I think at times I knew because we get a statement. But again, my mentality was you put your money in there and you leave it, right? Because it's for retirement and it'll grow a little something along the way. And so there were fluctuations. I think I might have gotten up to 11% at some point, right? But there were fluctuations in what I was getting in terms of return. But so yes, I had some general knowledge of that, and I could go into the portal and look at any statements at any point of time and see or have visibility into what was happening with the fund. But my mindset was this was a long-term investment, and so you leave it there. And I didn't really move it. And I know some people do, they go in and move their stuff around, but the intent, as you mentioned, of the fund was that it's preparing me for retirement later on. So I just put the money there and kind of let it alone. And so I didn't really pay much attention to the fact that it was kind of low. And with the information you provided, when we started to look at the plan and approach for evaluating the funds, I actually went back to the same portal for that financial institution, and I looked at the other funds that they had as well. And there were some that were not target funds that were getting better returns in the last year or 5 years. But then and you had me look at that in comparison to information on Morningstar and Yahoo Finance and one or two other sites as well. We were going to be able to piece together, the different parts of the story so that I could evaluate the funds really well. And so I went through those as well as thinking about the diversification. So did I have a small cap fund or a large cap and mid cap? And, do we consider international funds or not? And any other social funds, right? And so we looked at those categories and you gave us a mix with which I could then find a few funds that would have the kind of returns or better returns than I was getting from the target fund, and ones that I understood what also they were investing in to make a good decision about what was now going to be my portfolio mix for retirement. And then and then I made the change, right? And that was one of it was probably the aha moment, right? Because I made the shift in terms of where my money was allocated, both what was already invested and future investments, made that shift. And then I watched within the first quarter, I saw a huge shift in terms of my return. Now, again, I know that has some to do with what was happening in the market at the time, but some of that shift was really about putting my money in places that were doing better. And I didn't do that before because I just used what was recommended to me as opposed to evaluating the performance of the fund and understanding what it invests in and what that means so that I can make better and more informed decisions.
Well, I think what's really interesting too, and what I want our viewers to understand is sometimes we think that it's going to take a long time to make changes. And certainly I appreciate what Diya had said, certainly the markets have been up. And so that's one of the reasons that she had, a pretty good return quickly. But I think the most important thing that you said was that it was right there, right? But you didn't understand what was in front of you.
That's it was there.
Yeah,
it really was.
Yeah, so you were kind of like standing, 2 feet away from gold, but because you didn't understand what it meant, you didn't really know what to do. So the next aspect that I really want to talk to you about, Diya, is so you analyzed it, you moved the money, you started seeing returns, better returns, and then how did you maximize that now? So now you're like, oh man, I did this. So how did you really take advantage of, now that you knew how to apply this, what other areas outside of just your retirement account did you start to, apply that same kind of process?
Well, so I didn't do anything more with mutual funds, to be honest, right?
Okay.
My retirement fund was the only thing that I have mutual funds in. And so once I made that move in as far as better fund choices, and I put in place the system to increase my investment there annually until I was maxed out, I then moved to stock. So mutual funds, really the only place I have mutual funds at this particular time is in my retirement investment, and then I moved to stock, right? And so I started using, your approach, started looking at how do I now invest in stock, and that was, leveraging a very similar process as far as evaluating stock options, or stock and what stock would be good for me to invest in. But that was really the next move. It was now that we've tackled this particular area or challenge, and we had that a little bit more on autopilot in a better position. Now let's look at something else.
Excellent. So you analyzed, right? And you sort of optimized. And so now you're talking about going into stock, right? And investing in stock. And when people hear, it's one thing to be in a mutual fund, where other people are talking stocks. Talk about how investing in individual stocks really help you to kind of maximize your return once you got your start. So how did you actually start investing in individual stocks? Like, what mechanism did you use?
So fortunately, I had 401k in two places, and that meant that I had two financial institutions with which I could go to that were already providing services for myself, and then I could open up another account specifically for to invest. And then I also so I had opened up a share builder account some years ago for my sons, just as a small way to invest, and it got moved around. It was finally E-Trade, and so that was an easier site I felt to start off with investing. So I had a couple of others, financial institutions that we had, and I could use those, but I actually ended up starting using E-Trade as my first platform to be able to purchase stock. And I took a little bit of money. It wasn't a lot. I think I had $500 and started off there. But I had a list of stocks that I was considering as a result of looking and working through the process that I thought were going to be lucrative. And I put those in my watch list. Some of them I was not able to purchase initially at all. I didn't have enough to be able to start off, but I kept looking at those. I kept watching those. And then I go back and look at others, occasionally. And, one was Shopify, right? And it was really low at the time. And I waited a little long because I was just trying to watch and see, but still got in early enough to be able to see, some big increases. And that was one of the stock that actually was a huge contributor to the success that we talked about in the 2018, 2019 timeframe.
Wow. Well, you know what, to that end, I mean, you've given our audience so many nuggets just around how to analyze, optimize, and maximize. And so finally, what I want to ask you, Diya, is out of everything that you've learned on this journey, like, what have been your, like, two most impactful strategies that you feel could provide our audience with some more insight and encourage them to take action themselves?
Two most impactful. So the first was making the investment in my financial well-being with Wealthy You. And I know that sounds probably a lot like a commercial, but I had worked with other programs before. I had done financial assessments. I shouldn't say work with, but I'd done financial assessments before with Primerica and Ameritrade and some others, right? I had done those things, and you get this nice little sort of evaluation packet of, what your financial resources were, and many times those things felt unreachable, right? Being able to take the next steps or have the progress that I wanted felt unreachable. So it wasn't the first time that I'd done a financial assessment, but this was, I think, the first time that felt like it was something in reach, right? That I could make small changes and that would help me get there. So that was number one, making the step to invest in my financial literacy and well-being. And then the second, I guess, was investing the time, because it really wasn't as hard as I thought it was. It just meant that I had to spend the time, and we spend time on the things that we think are important. And some of us, spend hours, vegging on Netflix and binging on Netflix and other things like that. And I mean, if we take one of those hours away from watching Netflix or whatever the other TV station it is, streaming, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, we take an hour away from that, we have enough time to invest in making some better, some wiser choices that will actually pay dividends in the end.
And we started out this conversation talking about shifting to a wealth mindset, and it really being around not getting exposed to investing and being a first generation investor. And you certainly talked about your own family and not having that access. And so my final question to you is, what do you think having this knowledge now will do for your own family and your own children?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, we've started. So my sons have a bank account already, right? We went to the local grocery store because there was a bank inside there, and it was easy to access. We wanted it to be simple for them, and so we take them into the grocery store and sat them down, and we got their first bank accounts, and we make them use the register so that they understand putting money in and what happens with that. And we open up on a monthly basis. These are custodial accounts, so they don't have debit cards and all that, but we open up the monthly statement and we look at how much did they increase in interest versus what they put in. Minimal, small, but they see something. And when they get money for their birthday or for holidays, there's a question we ask, and it's, what do you want to do with your money? Do you want to put some into your account or what? And so we give them that option. We've bought books and a game that we use somewhat similar to Monopoly, but actually talks about investing and their monthly income versus expenses, and helping them to understand what are liabilities and that those are terms that I did not know at all at 8, right? But that's a conversation that we now have in our home, so that we talk about we talk about and help them to learn and understand, financial considerations that they would have to make. We talk about what it requires to buy a car and interest and all that stuff. I didn't know any of those things. We had none of those conversations. And when my son thinks that, I can just use a credit card and go buy whatever it wants, we have a discussion about what that credit card means and where does the money actually come from. And so the experience that I had and the confidence I had, but now changed it. And what did we do? Every one of my nieces and my nephews and my kids, they got stock for the holiday. We didn't buy anything elaborate or whatever, but we went to stockpile and we bought them, a share of something along with a toy, so that they would. So if they like Barbie dolls, they got Hasbro, right? If they're playing video games, they got Nintendo. We did those things so that we could start teaching them, and that was huge in terms of the investment. No, we don't have millions of dollars that we could put into funds and just give them yet. but I think we're paying a lot forward in terms of giving them the knowledge and education that they didn't have. And so all of my nieces, they have at least one of something that they play with or interested in, just to start getting them understanding what it means. And I think that that's going to be invaluable starting at 6 and 8 versus starting in your 40s, right? To understand this.
Love it, Diya. Well, you just put a button on it, because truly the knowledge of how to build wealth is the most valuable asset of all. So thank you for coming on Get Wealthy.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for the work that you do, Deborah.
Thank you for being here. Coming up, the 3 things you need to know to get wealthy from today's show. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I hope you've enjoyed our show. Here are the 3 things you need to know on how to get wealthy today. Now, the first thing you need to know is increase your financial acumen. You heard that over and over and over again. If you increase your knowledge, you can accomplish your goals. Number 2 is, let me start over. I had the notes here and then they went away. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. And here are the 3 things that you need to know or have learned in today's show. The first thing is, you know what? If you increase your knowledge, if you focus on increasing your financial acumen, you can build wealth. Number 2 is what you'll find is that as your knowledge increases, so does your confidence. And we certainly saw that with Diya. She went from investing in mutual funds to investing in stocks. And then finally, it's not enough to just invest in whatever plan is available to you. You've got to expand your options and your access to investing so you can really learn how to make your money grow. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and this is what you need to know to get wealthy. I hope you enjoyed the show today and that you apply everything that you've learned to get wealthy.